gosh, this is real, you know. Um, and Yeah, so it's towards the border of Tennessee. Mm. And just on the whim, I said, let's just look. I have no idea what looking at land sound really is. So we went out there. It's like 87 acres, 14 on one side of the road and 60 something on the other side of the road, for a very good price as far as I can tell. But still we're talking about 80 acres. So very good price isn't spare change exactly. Um, but it's a very good price, I think, in part because on the 60 something acre side, right smack in the middle, is a cemetery.
Wow.
Um, Not a big public cemetery, but like a private, three families, I think, cemetery that's active. The most recent burial was 21. And that has made, I think, that piece of land undesirable to all the developers who want to potentially do things there. That gated community, whatever.
Right.
That piece of land has been rendered rather unattractive. Of course, we these weirdo Buddhists, we're like, yay, cemetery. Yeah, we'll try to not, appear too excited if we take the next step towards interest in this land. We have to say to the seller, "Well, you have a cemetery here." I don't know.
Gotta keep a poke.
Poker face, yeah.
So we took it as an auspicious sign that there's a cemetery, right? Right, and because of that, they have maintained a gravel road, up to this. So that's also kind of our access. So we'll see. I visited last Sunday. That's why I wasn't able to. Last Sunday, on our way up to Northern Virginia, we stopped by to visit a Thai forest tradition monastery in Lexington, Virginia. And it was a good visit. There were 8 of us from here that drove 9 hours and spent 2 hours at the forest monastery and turned around and came back.
Wow.
But Chris and I, we went further on to Northern Virginia to see some people, to talk about this project. And very inspiring, this forest monastery. I have always had a soft spot for the Thai Theravada forest tradition. Grew up familiar with that tradition because Malaysia is just south of the border of Thailand. And then I visited various forest monasteries in the West, in England, here. So it's this is like over 200 acres. This particular monastery. An abbot in his 70s,
Wow.
born and raised in Virginia, but lived in Thailand for 35 years. He was attendant to one of the most famous forest monks of Thailand. He lived into his 110 or something like that when he passed. Ajahn Mahabua. So this abbot lived there in Thailand, and before that he was a monk in Sri Lanka. So he has been a monk longer than I have been alive. Presence is just like amazing. I was saying on Wednesday night, like I really felt like I was transported back to 11th, 12th century Tibet in these early Kagyupa communities. Essentially like the current Thai forest communities. Disciples gathered around a teacher and very simple, basic living conditions. The clarity of purpose and the clarity of their practice comes across very clearly for all of us. So that was very inspiring to see, and it's very generous with sharing with us his experience building that monastery. You'll have a chance, I think, to go do a retreat there at that monastery. You just need to be able to get a spot, that's all. Everything provided for. Very basic, but everything provided for. There's no fees charged or anything. You give or don't give a dana, that's fine.
Wow.
And what's the name of the?
It's Forest Dhamma Monastery. And Dhamma spelled with two M's rather than RM. Like Dharma, right? In Sanskrit, in Pali is Dhamma, Dhamma. Dhamma, Dhamma. It's a monastery for male monks, but they accept women guests for short periods. I think the first visit for anyone, if you stay overnight, is limited to, I think, three nights, I think. Then the next visit, I think, 2 weeks or something like that. I was talking to a translator who studied at Ranjung Yeshe in Kathmandu. He was saying how in Ranjung Yeshe recently, or not too long ago, somebody came and talked about the Thai forest tradition, and so people who kind of look across traditions, they interesting to note that they also said, like, oh, the Thai forest monastery is probably closest to the early Kagyupas in Tibet, like Gampopa and Gampopa's descendants, monastic but forest dwellers, individual cabins, and really kind of working on overcoming the mental defilements.
We were in a retreat in 2018 in Nepal with Shogirima, and he some Thai monks came and he stood them up in front of us and said, this is good stuff these guys are doing. This is really good stuff. You should celebrate them.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's probably Rinpoche that said that. Then it kind of trickled down to, so that there's a general sense at Ranjung Yeshe that the Thai forest monastery. It's Thai Thai Buddhism is divided into the forest tradition and then the mainstream, which is town and village and city based. And so town, village, city based is very much like wherever Buddhism is mainstream, so they are involved in all the stuff that goes on, the economy, the politics, the culture, all of that. And the forest monks are those who say, we're going to do something different. We're going to step out of this and draw a clearer line between, confused existence and the Buddhist way. So I was very grateful to the abbot. I kept repeating it. He probably thought I was kind of crazy. I kept repeating how grateful I am that he's there and that he has come back from Thailand to anchor such a place. the Buddha Dharma lacking in this country, and I probably contributed to it in a small way because what I do is the scope is so small. But nonetheless, I think this lack of taking serious interest in supporting monastic community. I think now more than ever, I feel we need a strong monastic community. I don't mean strong in numbers necessarily. It cannot be strong in numbers. If it's strong in numbers, then it's the mainstream. The Buddha never intended for the monastic order mainstream. It was designed to stand out, not blend in. My design is to stand out. Listening to this phrasing, I was listening to the BBC program, or was it on NPR? Young software engineer in California, talking about his experience of coming to this country as an immigrant. He's from the Sikh community, so they keep a turban, you know. He talked about his struggles keeping his turban and wondering why he had to do that. And then it was around September 11th, not too long, you know, a few years before that they arrived, and then all the discrimination against, you know, Sikhs, people equating them with, you know, Taliban. One of the things that said that in their tradition, when the equivalent of like a bar mitzvah is when they when the younger boys they keep kind of tie a little bun on top. Then at your coming of age, you have the full turban, you know, with a long cloth and everything. And so one of the things he said when he protested against that, he didn't want to do that. His grandfather said to him, you know, when he was complaining, he said, you know, other Sikh people here have already done away with the turban. You know, why do we need to put it? And you know, and his grandfather said to him, he said, you know, our gurus by design intended for us to stand out and not blend in. Who are we to change this? That really, you know, I thought, oh, wow, you know. So same, you know, the monastic community was never meant to be big, never meant to be a way to bully people into joining when they don't have the karma or the desire to join, and never meant to be like a judgment on, oh, you others who are not monastic aren't good enough, but it was designed to serve as a reference point, an anchoring element in the fourfold community. Fourfold community is lay men, lay women, female monks or nuns, and male monks. These are the fourfold Sangha that the Buddha established. So all who are of the Shakyamuni's family consists of these four parts. So it was always the majority was the laymen and women. The minority was always the monks and the nuns. By design, it's supposed to be limited. In some ways, the monks and nuns, as the Buddha originally intended them, they are to serve as, you know, you could say, you know, walking, sitting, and walking and sitting Buddha statues. You know, in a way, just as the statues are not the Buddha, so to say, so the monks and nuns, they're not yet Buddha. They are supposed to manifest by their deportment, by their presence, living reminder that, you know, there is such a thing as Buddha. But when monastic, when monks and nuns became too mainstream, and then the line began to blur, it's almost like blending into the rest of society. You see them at the mall, you see them at the theater, you see them riding motorcycles around. Something else is going on, not necessarily bad, but just, something else now. These forest monks, I think, yeah, a good thing to support, even if we ourselves can't do it. This Hermitage project, if we go forward, if we actually start making it happen, I can tell you right off the bat right now, I cannot live as austere as these Thai forest monks. Not going to be like that, but getting a little bit closer to that, I think it's a good thing. Even the abbot has a cabin that is only like 12 by 12.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like yes. So Milarepa's community. Talk about Milarepa. Milarepa's community wasn't monastic in this sense. Yeah, community weren't there to serve as a reminder to the laity. In fact, Milarepa's community was by design away from public view, and a small band of disciples following a master. And sometimes master would take one or two disciples and go even further away so that, most of the disciples are not around. So this is the hermit Siddha model. So you have the town institutional city model of monastics. Then you have the forest model, and then Milarepas is you're not able to trace it back to the Buddha's time. This is a different development, but nonetheless part of the Buddhist heritage. Is these communities such as Milarepas. Even more intensely, it's around a charismatic leader, a teacher. So they didn't wear any uniform in particular, Eventually, they're known as the repas, meaning the ones who wear the white cotton. Cotton, in their context, is basically the cheapest kind of fabric. It's coarse. It's like rough cotton, and also thin. So it's by default that Milarepa and disciples were wearing cotton. So they were eventually, when those became famous, they became the cotton-clad ones, the repas. So much so that even among some circles, I think Trangul Rinpoche tried to introduce a repa ordination, in some ways as a parallel to the Nyingma's Ngakpa ordination. The West is very fashionable to have, I don't know if you guys have heard, a Ngakpa ordination. But that's mostly a Nyingma phenomena, I think most people don't understand. They think it's all across, So Trangul Rinpoche of the Gamakagyu, I think, not very, it didn't catch on. Gave Repa ordination, the cotton-clad ones, to some lay people in the US. So Milarepa's community originally, they were not necessarily recognized as a particular order or a particular lifestyle. It's just like they're not lay people in the sense of maintaining a home, farming the land, or engaging in trade, but rather they live up in the mountains, only seen when they run out of food provisions. They might come into town for a while and beg for like simple survival food, you know, and again disappearing into the mountains, not seen again, you know. So Milarepa was living that kind of a life. So at some point in his life, he said, at this point, he says, you know, this is when he was older, he says, at this point, I have reached a level of attainment that it really doesn't matter if I live in the mountains. As far as I'm concerned, it matters little anymore whether I live up here in the mountains or wander in the towns and villages. It says, it makes no difference to me anymore. That is with the understanding that at some point it was important that he had to remain in the mountains, isolated. But then, even when he said that, he said, now it's no longer affects me. However, to serve as an example for others, I have chosen to remain in the mountains. To inspire those disciples that need him, you know, to be with them out in the wilderness, not seen by others for the most part, he chose to remain in the mountains. Yeah, so our situation for most of us is not that, right? I'm talking about these forest monks, also not that. But we should not think, you know, oh, there's nothing there for me. Oh, you are going to emphasize this, you know, I'm just going to be always second fiddle. It's not like that, you know. It's not like that at all. It's really like we practice the Dharma in whatever context that we are in. So what we need to do is, whatever context, life situation that we are currently in, I think it's important for us to say, okay, is the Dharma really important to me? And from there, is the Dharma really important to me? Don't keep that too abstract, you know. Oh, yes, yes, it's important to me, you know. But it's good to do an audit, so to say. This morning while I was driving around, went over to the center, some of the young guys are there. And yeah, this single young people. They're making tatas and doing practice in the meditation hall. So it was good to see. We should, like, you know, make it take. So while driving around, I was listening to some NPR interview. There are lots of, you know, good stuff that you can absorb, you know. And they were interviewing this woman who wrote a book about. I don't know the title of the book, but there were many good Dharma points, you know. The one point when I entered the list, you know, this program, so to say, she was saying how you need to put on that oxygen mask yourself first before you know, like the advice, you know, whenever you fly, yeah, put on you first before you attempt to help others. That's essentially the view that we're talking about here, you know. You have to take care of yourself first. Yeah? That's what we call the individual liberation focus. But then this individual liberation focus cannot be pursued as an end unto itself. This individual liberation focus has to be done with the understanding that the more I can free myself from self-grasping, then the more authentically the ability to cherish others, to be other-centered, will become more and more possible. That's what we call bodhicitta, right? Yeah, so she was talking about that. Of course, didn't talk about bodhicitta. She's talking about things in general. And another thing she was saying, she said, you should not harm yourself. Also, you should not hurt your own feelings, she says. I was like, oh, what could that mean? I thought, oh, this is like some new age stuff. And so actually, she gave very good advice. She said, like some of us, we continue to follow certain people, certain accounts on, Facebook or Instagram, simply for them to annoy us, right? Just to have a place to get angry at, She was like, don't do that, just unfriend already or unfollow already. Like, but but we do that, right? Simply so that, you can get angry. It's like, that's what she meant by, don't hurt your own feelings like that, Then we're going to be careful, like some of us even justify it by saying, oh, this is how I'm going to train to be a bodhisattva, if I give up on them, la la la, But often we're not doing any good there, It just makes it feels good to be self-righteous, or just to be righteous even, forget about self, It just feels good to be so right, No, leave it alone, right? Don't hurt your own feelings. The third instruction she gave, so I'm getting my guru is turning up on the radio. I don't even remember this woman. So she said, you have to take an audit, of three things. She said, essentially, in our lives, we have time to spend, we have money to spend, we have energy to spend. She said, I mean, essentially, these are the three things that we have, to spend. So she says, ask yourself, like, what are your values? And so in this context, it's like, if you say Dharma, if you say Buddha Dharma, the practice of Buddha Dharma is important to you. She said, okay. Often we just keep this abstract. She said, yeah, I thought, like, here are my values. And then when I actually took a week to audit, so to say, right? How much time am I spending on what? Like just every day, like, okay, when I woke up, for the first half an hour, I did this. Then the next half an hour or 45 minutes, then I did this. Then I drove to somewhere for this amount of time. Then I this, and she said, you take an audit of like, and then you'll find often what you say is a value to you, you have spent barely any time on it. Then you can see, where all your time, your money, the energy one is harder to audit, but the first two is very finite, very specific. You can audit that. You do that audit, and here's where I would add, you do that audit not to feel bad about anything, not to feel guilty, you do that audit to kind of clarify, like, is Dharma really that important to me? Is Dharma practice really that important to me? Now, when you do this audit, you don't have to limit it to like, how many minutes am I sitting to meditate? Let's say you are shopping, right? And you have enough presence of mind to say, okay, I'm shopping for food right now, but I'm also using the Dharma to watch my mind, my reaction to things. You can count that. You can put that under the column of Dharma practice. But then if after the fact you said, well, I just walked around mindlessly, not apply Dharma, then that go in the direction of like, well, I walked around shopping for an hour. You cannot put it in the column of practicing Dharma an hour. Just to say that don't limit Dharma practice to just when I'm seated a certain way, when I put on certain robes, when I burn this incense, when I chant that, you can expand it, and you say, oh, I drank coffee for half an hour. But if during you find that, well, actually the half an hour for most of the time I was reflecting on Dharma topics. Okay, then that half an hour, but nonetheless, do a time and money audit for a week, 3 days. Give us, some perspective and say, this is where I am. So the other day I said to someone, someone was saying, I like to be this way, I like to be that way, I like that style, I like that look. I said to him, I think you like to like, not like. So many of us, when we say I like to practice Dharma, I think a lot of times it's still I liking practicing Dharma. Right? There's still this gap, because I like liking to do Dharma seriously. Well, better than disliking, but nonetheless, it's liking to practice Dharma. So many of these Milarepa songs in here by now, we're almost done with this, or at least one time reading through this. So much of this is Milarepa telling us, gain clarity about your own stuff. Often quoted in translation. I've never seen the original, what it is. Often quoted, these memes, Milarepa memes, it's like he says, my religion, in this case, I know what that word is, my dharma, my chu, in Tibetan, chu, my dharma, but it's translated as, my religion is not kidding myself. So much of these songs is Milarepa saying, don't kid yourself. Gain clarity about your own situation. Gain clarity of where we are. And then after gaining that clarity, again, don't let your, habitual guilt, wherever you picked it up from, whether the synagogue or the church, doesn't matter, but don't let your habitual guilt drag you further down. To gain clarity is just to assess, oh, yeah, to get to Asheville, there's so many more miles, now I'm like mile marker, whatever, it's just that, and not like be disappointed and think, oh, just a couple of hours, I'll be there, when you're like, no, it's actually another day, just having clarity, good. Yeah. Questions, thoughts, or tell us where you have been readings up to this point. Yeah, any of those.
Can I ask you a question about
Yes.
about your vision for this center in? You're saying it's a Thai forest monastery, but you're
No.
not.
We're only researching Thai Forest Monastery, but the Drigong Forest Hermitage is it's a residential community for people who want to live their monastic life in simplicity, tuning out distractions, So it's to support that community. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then, okay, so in concrete terms, get land, scrap land. First thing to build is to build the Dharma hall. The Dharma hall is the meditation hall. Yeah. No thrones, no brocades, no gold.
Yeah.
If possible, one big, good-sized Buddha statue. And you know, this one in Virginia is beautiful. It's wood. It's all and then nothing exotic. I don't want it to be a curiosity. Like built in such a way that blends into the landscape in that sense, right? So first thing to build is a Dharma hall. Now, before the Dharma hall, maybe we have to build a simple house where the people who are going to help build this. So it's going to be a lot of sweat equity. So maybe these young people turning up as part of this development. And they're excited. They're like, yes, we're going to go put in the sweat equity. And so you need to have a house to be able to house people who are going to be helping to build this, right? The basic framing and structure. Of course, you get professionals and then all the details, right? So first the Dharma hall. And as the Dharma hall is being put up, then these cabins, right? I am planning to kind of slowly kind of transition into my life here in Nashville, to go into this. Okay, just in case you're wondering, no, I will still travel and teach at different places, but instead of coming back to my own house and doing my own thing, I will live in one of these cabins. So these cabins will be built as necessary, and they will also be built by, I want to live there. Well, how much equity can I bring to build this, right? But not equity in the sense of once it's built, it belongs to the hermitage. It belongs to the monastery, and as long as I live there, then it's there for me. Right? When I die, then of course, obviously, it goes back to the monastery. If I leave, it stays with the monastery. So other people too, if they say, I want to live like this now. So it's mainly like, I don't want the model of like a retreat center where people think, oh, I come here and do this for 3 years and then I'm going to go back into the world.
Right. Okay.
That cannot be the main focus. Of course, in realistic terms, that's what's going to happen. But when you join this residential community, you join with the intention of wanting to live like this for the rest of your life. But of course, we also don't want to make leaving a kind of a defeat or a shameful thing. You don't want people. Never good to have people feel like they are trapped. Then all kinds of trouble comes from there. Right? So there is a proper process for people to give back their monastic vows and transition back into being a lay person, all of that, right? So that's those cabins built as necessary. Then shorter term cabins could be built, 10 by 10, 12 by 12, no inspection necessary, no indoor plumbing, you'll have a public, like a toilet bath, building. Then those smaller, 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 is for people who want to go for a week, 3 nights, 10 nights, whatever, right? It's reasonable to live and just, not have plumbing. You have close enough, Then the most expensive piece is, I think, this other building that I ideally we should have also is Sarah, you've been to Southern Dharma. So it's like a building like the lodge in Southern Dharma. So on the ground level, you have commercial kitchen, a dining hall, and an office, then 2 floors of like dormitory style rooms. So then groups who want to do programs can use that housing facility. That's the most expensive thing in the whole project. That can wait, when the conditions gather. And yeah. So that's, I don't know. Am I answering the question?
Yeah, but if you live there, if you, let's say that you did that, what's your time? How do you spend your time? I mean, that's a naive question, but
Yeah, no, it's a naive, but it's a practical question. So the typical schedule is you gather as a community at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day for the communal practices, the chants, the recitations. Then you gather again for the main meal of the day. So here, this community will not be a one meal a day, but the main formal meal will be that, and then a simpler for those who need to eat, in the evening, simpler individually. Go to the kitchen, whatever is left over from, right, the main meal, you just eat that. Then, right, then. Practically speaking, actually, for the first 10 years, there is going to be a lot of work, right? You're still developing the place.
yeah,
And then after that, you are basically, I think we're going to apply for this designation where basically it's like a land trust, you take care of the forest. And
yeah.
so there are trees to cut, there's like underbrush to clear, right? So it's a working monastery in that sense. Yeah. Then from like winter months, right? That's when the intensive practice. Yeah. Then individuals go to the teacher, well, in this case, me, right, for their own practices. Yeah. So there are communal practices that people gather to do, and then spread out the day. Different people are doing different things.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So some residents will be doing like intensive retreat, and some will be like doing, forest maintenance.
Yeah.
But all right, your how you live, it's all the training of the mind. That's at the center.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to ask something. In this group, we've at least once, I think more than once, and we've always said, oh, we should ask Dr. Lye about this.
Ah,
Naive questions kind of thing is, but there's so much of requesting blessings, grant your blessings so that my mind may, with Dharma, and from dakinis, from lamas, from whatever. And so can you just say something about what blessings are from any of those sources? Is there a way of kind of describing?
blessings here. Good question. Blessings here basically mean inspiration. May I be inspired, to become like you. Yeah. And Shantideva says at the opening of Bodhicharvatara, he says, my life is like the endless dark nights, That's how all of us live. But in the dark of the night, once in a while, lightning flashes, that illuminates the whole dark night. Briefly, but enough for me to, I mean, imagine, like When Shantideva uses this, it's more effective. There's no street lights, right? There's no artificial light. Yeah?
Yeah.
So imagine like you live like in a place where it's always dark, right? Once in a while, a lightning flashes across the sky. You get a view of your whole surrounding. You're like, wow, right? And then it's gone. And Shantideva says, Buddha's blessings, the great Bodhisattva's blessings to us, it's like this flash of lightning in the dark of the night that shows me what's possible. That's blessings. Then in Vajrayana, there's, oh, bless me to find a boyfriend, bless me to get money, bless me to la la la, bless me to blah blah blah, bless me this, bless me that. All those are what we call mundane stuff. It is true, like one of the characteristics of the tantras, scholars like to discuss these things and debate these things, like what sets tantra apart from non-tantra material. It is true, I don't think in the West this is openly talked about in Dharma centers, because most lamas don't want us to get caught up in these things for good reasons. But it is true that one of the characteristics of when you look at tantra or secret mantra, tantra can mean a lot of things. Okay, if you're on the internet, it's usually not safe for work links. You type tantra. So because there's like sexuality and violence also related to tantra, but generally in Buddhist tantra, like as in the different teachings of the Buddha are called sutras, right? The sutra of the mindfulness of breath, the sutra of blah 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 sutra. So different like basically transcripts of teachings that the Buddha gave. Another genre of transcripts of teachings that Buddha gave, they are called tantras. So what sets tantra apart from sutras is that in the tantras, quite explicitly, worldly mundane goals and concern are put together with world transcending concerns. So like if you go to 84,000, the project to translate the Buddha's teachings from the Tibetan into English, there are some tantras that have been translated. So one good example is a recent one that because of the blessing empowerment I gave on Gurukule. Gurukule essentially as a symbol is the goddess of love. It's like the Indian Cupid. Yeah, on the gross level, on the obvious level, is the Indian Cupid. I mean, she has a bow and arrow, and it is said that she strikes. She will, like shoot into someone's heart, and then they're madly in love, with whoever is telling her to shoot, So in there, in the tantra on the practice of Gurukule, the Buddha, whoever that Buddha is, the Buddha, the main teacher of the text, will begin by talking about mundane goals. Like you want this, you want that, you want this, you want that. Oh yeah, you could practice Gurukule and get all these mundane goals, right? Including like protection from poison. So for Gurukule, it's to be able to have the power to charm and to entice and to attract others, to be able to have like influence over others, but also to be able to dispel poisons, to counteract the threat of venomous snakes, and to control the weather, all sorts of like basically mundane concerns. I mean, there are real concerns if you live in a place where there's poisonous snakes all the time. You want protection from them, But also in there, suddenly like in chapter 2 or something like that, you know, suddenly, like almost like you don't know where it's coming from. Suddenly someone gets up and say, "Oh, Vajrapani, tell us about emptiness." And like that, the rest of that chapter goes on in this like profound statements about emptiness, the lack of inherent existence, and you know how to unentangle ourselves from suffering, and how, you know, all the things in the world, you know, involved with the kleshas, and therefore, you know, not worth pursuing. And then the next chapter, you know, how to entice people to go along with you. Yeah, so the tantras are peculiar, you know, they mix these two sets of concerns. You know? They seemingly say, you know, you can have your cake and eat it too. Seemingly. So yeah, so therefore, you know, not surprisingly, right? Yeah. Like what are these blessings when we keep saying, "Oh, bless me to do this, bless me this, bless me that." The real blessing, right? It's Shantideva's way of putting it, you know. We live in such darkness about what's possible and what's meaningful. Once in a while, you know, when the lightning flashes, we can, you know, we pray that, you know, we have not nodded off when the lightning flashes. And sometimes not even nodding off, you know, our karma is such that, you know, when the lightning flashes, that's the moment where you blink, you know. And then that's it, you know. Everyone else was blessed except for you, you know, you blinked.
That's so great. So we have a prayer list here that we've started doing in the last couple of months.
Uh-huh.
It was brought here by Lama Tarchin Rinpoche, and it's
Yeah.
the prayer that swiftly fulfills all wishes, Padma
Mhm.
Sambhava. And so that's where this question came up in that
Yeah,
context.
Sampalundrukma. Yeah.
People are really sick, you know. We're worried about people that are really sick or dying.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
What
So
do we
those
do?
so those are the mundane concerns, you know, that are real concerns, you know.
Yeah.
So you also pray for that, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, freedom from suffering would be considered a mundane type of thing or of earthly concerns?
Freedom from suffering. There are two types of freedom from suffering, you know. There is the freedom of suffering. I have a toothache, you know, when can I get to the dental office? That's a mundane concern.
So it's less existential and more personal.
Yeah, I guess you could call it acute, you know. Your acute pain that you just want it to go away, you know. So there's suffering and there's pain, right? Yeah. Suffering, dukkha. Dukkha, that's something else, you know.
I appreciate that discussion of Tantra. You know, it's floated around all the time,
Yeah.
but I didn't even know it was part of the teachings, the body of teachings. Like you're comparing it to the sutras, which is a different body of teaching.
Yes. Yes.
And these both originate supposedly with the Buddha.
Right. Right. In Tibetan tradition, you know, like it's called the Donga sutras and tantras. Yeah? But these are not exclusive terms, exclusive to Buddhists. Hindu have their tantras as well. To a lesser degree, the Jain religion and other ancient Indian religion also have tantras, but to a lesser degree. Buddhists and Hindus have different tantras as a genre of texts. So what characterizes these tantras, you know, not from internal descriptions, but from academic, scholars, quote unquote, impartially looking at things, they say, well, in the tantras, these two sets of concerns are woven together. Sometimes it's a little puzzling for us. One moment it's talking about such lofty spiritual freedom, and the next moment they're telling you seemingly, oh, you want to steal away your neighbor's wife. This is what you need to do. I mean, really, it's like, really, yeah. And it's fascinating if it is like, to study, like ancient Indian kind of pharmacology, because often also in this tantras, it's like, Harry Potter's dark arts, right? Or magical potions. Yeah, not dark arts. Defense against the dark arts. They don't teach dark arts at Hogwarts, but potions. And so, yeah, so often these tantras also have long list of, like, there's one sutra, not a tantra. It's called the Golden Light Sutra. And so Golden Light Sutra, for again these Western, academic, impartial scholars. I mean, impartial in one way, partial in another way, at least religiously impartial. They will consider like the Sutra of Golden Light to be a proto-tantra. That's how the field describes it. A pre-explicit tantra. So it has enough tantric elements. Again, it has things like this. It's like Buddha chapter 5 is this profound kind of teaching on emptiness and all of that, right? But then there are also chapters dedicated to like the four great kings. Who are these kings? Spirit guardian kings of the four directions, and how they support countries and governments that are run on the basis of dharma, the 10 virtues, 10 non-virtues, and how they pledge to protect kingdoms who promote the 10 virtues and deter with people from the 10 non-virtues. So there's a chapter like that. But in there is a short chapter, which is basically several spa recipes.
What?
Yeah, like to like there's a few recipes on like bath. Yeah, different types of herbs together, and then soak them in milk, and then you soak in them, and you'll make your skin glow. And I'm just waiting for someone to like Sutra of Golden Light, bath salts, or
Bath bomb.
yeah, it has things like that in there, like face cream, and it's like, oh, okay, well, we're just covering all bases.
So these terms were applied later, I assume. People who studied the teachings just kind of separated them out into these two categories.
Well, no, because as in the two categories, some texts, explicitly in the title it says tantra or sutra. Yeah, then the mundane concerns and the transcendent concerns, that also mentioned in the text. So the
I had no
idea
idea that.
seems to be, again, from academic point of view. Obviously, from an academic point of view, we would say these tantras, you could not literally say the historical Buddha Shakyamuni taught these. The timeline just doesn't match. Also, things mentioned in this, we know they didn't exist in 5th century BC, So you can kind of situate them in temporal, context, when you look at these texts, right? So literally, you cannot say, Buddha Shakyamuni said this, right? So, but from a practitioner's point of view, there's not necessarily a problem, whether the actual historical Buddha said it or not. But that's not yet where the real problem is. Now, for Christianity, that could be a problem because of the way Christianity frames the historicity of Jesus, and so much is kind of dependent on that. If Jesus wasn't real, then everything falls apart. I think some time ago I talked about this. Was it with this group or another group? One of my colleagues from graduate school. He wants to show how the Buddha did not historically exist, that it was a composite figure from later time. And he's really frustrated because nobody seems excited with the topic. But then the Buddhists are not excited about topic, not because we think if you can prove that, then everything collapses. So the Historical Jesus Project that started at Harvard University, I think 100 biblical scholars in the 70s or whatever gathered at Harvard to start this Historical Jesus Project. There were a lot of detractors that said, these are, like bad people, they're going to destroy the faith. So their response is not the same response from the Buddhist side. The Buddhist side is not protesting that someone is doing that. It's just saying,
It's a lot of effort.
Yeah, because yeah, whatever, like, so what if it's not real? Like, what is real? So there's a more leeway with like materials that obviously come from a later point in history, claiming to be the words of the Buddha, and never quite taken literally, like, and so it's a little more fluid, which also results in no surprise. I was complaining the other day here. I said, like all the, like basically like in Nashville, right? Christianity is standard, it's mainstream, right? The various types of Christianity. So that when they talk about ecumenical, they mean like, 21 types of Christian, of which there are like 9 types of Baptists. So there is that. Then the alternative, right? Meaning anything else that is not, based on Jesus here. And I said of the alternative, the most kind of troublesome is Buddhism, because like we have weekly programs. Thursday we call Open Sangha, and people who come in, like mostly they're really interested in Buddhism, but every once in a while, you have certain individuals for periods of time, they will turn up. And I'm sure it's the same at EBS. They will turn up because they have read something. Now they want everyone to know what Buddhism is according to them. And they'll dominate the whole discussion each time. Our latest version is some guy who thinks that quantum physics explains everything. Of course, poor guy has only read like half a book about quantum physics. And I don't know any books on Buddhism, but now everything he relates to quantum physics and therefore Buddhism. And it's like, so because Buddhism is fluid, right? In terms of like the historicity of the Buddha and then the sutras, right? So it's great from one perspective, but also really unruly from another perspective, because just about anything anyone wants to say about it, they can say, well, it's Buddhism, why not? It's a lot harder to do that with Islam. It's a lot harder to do that with Judaism. It's a lot harder to do that with Christianity. Where, Yeah, just about anyone can make any statement and say, well, that's Buddhism according to me, and I'm right. You know. So now the people who facilitate the Thursday nights when I'm not around, they're like, could you change the format before you leave? Because certain people have turned up that they keep hijacking the conversation to Buddhism according to them. It's not just anything goes, you know. Oh, page 579. And then, you know,
Dr. Lye, we also are talking about what to read when we're finished with this book.
yes.
What do you think about the words of my perfect teacher?
Yeah. I think we talked about this. Wasn't there something else that we identified?
Yeah, we had a couple of ideas, but this is one that is kind of like whatever. I mean, we want to know what you think of it. It's a book that I've never read that book. I would like to read it, and I would like to read it with you.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
but
It's specific to Ngondro practice.
yeah,
That's the thing.
that's the problem.
Yeah. And then it's actually the teachings are general enough to apply to different Ngondros. But if you're not doing any Ngondro, then it seems a little
Okay.
kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But when I was there, we also talked about a couple I don't remember now. Do you remember?
There was Old Path, White Clouds.
Yeah.
Right, that's the
White
Buddha.
clouds.
Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh's Life of the Buddha. Okay, there was something else.
Well, we also talked about doing Lojong, where we would read several different books.
Yeah. The Lojong with several different translations and different commentaries. Yeah, I think that's the one that I kind of like, you know.
Okay,
Um,
we can do that.
yeah, and I think Kendra Rinpoche just came up with another 7-point Lojong, right?
Yeah.
And then, like I said, you know, and then I have my particular emphasis of the 7-point Lojong that I could also expand on, you know. And
I mean,
then
you're-
I have a set of 16 teachings on Lojong, which you all could also listen to as you all are reading, you know, whether I'm around or not.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's one possibility. Yeah.
Well, before we leave Milarepa, though, we also talked about some people that are in the group now were not in the group at the beginning, and so they missed the early chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, so those of us who were here, talked about some of our favorites, like
Yes.
the demoness with the red demoness and the
Yeah, you could do the greatest hits, you know.
yeah. So sometimes we have a video of you teaching on a chapter, but oftentimes we don't.
Yeah,
So how do you feel about us going back to some of our favorites?
we can do that. Yeah.
You talking about them again, because we don't have you on record.
Yeah, so we could do that, and maybe let's have a time frame in identifying the greatest hits, and then we'll see maybe more specifically when I do turn up, it will just be a teaching on that song or that portion of the song or something like that.
Okay. So that'll be our job, is to tell you which ones we
Yes, right,
visit.
right,
Okay.
right.
Thank you. That works.
Sure. Now, speaking of mundane concerns like sickness, yeah. So in this song, I just happened to turn to it, and someone says, you know, we have taken what you said to heart. This is for you who have for the physical book is 579. Now, please tell us about the suffering of sickness. And Milarepa sang this song. Well then, benefactors who have revulsion, revulsion towards samsara, confused existence, not towards life, but confused existence. Benefactors who have revulsion to explain about the suffering of sickness. Sickness suddenly attacks the body, and pain comes unexpectedly. The demons of wind, bile, and phlegm come upon you. These are the three energies. They are not literally wind, literally bile, literally phlegm. They are like the three humors. But this is in the Tibetan medical system. There are three types of energy. When these demons of these energy, meaning when these energy become disturbed, agitated, then when blood and pus start to boil and cause pain, sickness, and discomfort, cause the senses to collapse. Though you lie in a comfortable bed, you toss and turn a lot by the power of your previous karma of avarice. Though you are given good food, it just comes right back up. Though you stay in a cool place, fire element makes you hot. Though you wear warm clothes, the water element makes you cold. Though friends and relatives surround you, there's no way they can take your suffering of sickness. Though burn doctors are experts in healing, meaning shamanic doctors are experts in healing, it's difficult to eliminate the illness of previous karma. Yeah, so, sickness is a real suffering, real enough for you and me. But in Milarepa's terms, these are mundane concerns. So in the wake of a mundane concern turning up, he says, what do? If you don't realize the reality beyond sickness, then the suffering of sickness is fathomless, no end, bottomless. Since you don't know when sickness will come your way, for fear of suffering, it is fitting to practice the sublime Dharma. So he says, there is a reality that is beyond sickness. So this reality beyond sickness is not a reality where sickness doesn't visit, where sickness doesn't turn up. This reality beyond sickness is in the midst of sickness. There is something more true than that sickness. Do you have any access to that? He asked. Yes, if you don't, then you need to practice Dharma. Which then also tells us what is actually practicing Dharma? Actually practicing Dharma is discovering that reality. Not the reality promised by Oprah and, Dr. whatever, Phil. Yeah. But the reality that is beyond sickness, meaning even when sickness turns up, no problem. One of the great luminaries of Tibetan Buddhism in recent times, Khyentse Rinpoche, mountain of a man, like for Tibetan, he was very unusual. He was big bones, big person. And of course, when he got older, got heavier, but like a mountain, The last maybe 10, 15 years of his life, he physically, was deteriorating, and wherever he moved, two monks have to hold him on both sides. He will move around. But otherwise, if he doesn't need to go to the toilet or somewhere, he's just content to sit on his bed. An endless stream of people come to request transmissions because he's a storehouse of unbroken transmissions that he had. So Tibetan Buddhists of various lineages would come and say, "Oh, Rinpoche, do you have the transmission for this text, this practice, that practice?" And almost inevitably, he has that transmission. And what he has to do is, he has to give the oral transmission. Sometimes he has to perform empowerments, endless, they say. To no end, he was always giving, no matter who asked for. So he didn't really have time, to go to the gym, He didn't have time to take care of his body, And, but he had no suffering, yeah, based on the people that I know who was around him. You can see that physically he was disadvantaged, so to say, that by normal terms, you can even say, well, he had a bad diet and he didn't move, he didn't walk enough, he didn't run, he didn't go to the gym, and so he was like this, But then when you look at him, really, he did not suffer. He did not fuss about, his body not cooperating. And he lived, to quite old. But every minute of his waking hour, he was doing transmissions. That's the reality beyond sickness. Now, we might say, like someone lazy like me, might say, oh, I don't need to exercise, take care of the body. See, there's cancer in Butcher. But the thing is, I'm not spending every minute of my waking hours with Dharma, If I do an audit, quite a number of hours have gone to like, Netflix or, internet or random searches or this book or, that idea. And then you cannot pretend like, oh, I'm benefiting beings. It's okay, even if my body, no, when suffering comes, when body stops cooperating, then, oh, the mind is completely depressed, the mind is stuck, and, it's not practicing Dharma.
That's great.
Yeah, so I think another group is using the Zoom or whatever. Good to see all of you. And
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, yeah.
Sarah, you have a safe drive. But give me a call right after this. Elena in Mexico is coming. So she might be also looking for housing. I don't know if I could connect both of you or somehow, So just give me a call and we can talk quickly.
I'll give you a call.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.